It looked like it was a very comprehensive, itemized list of expenses. And I'm like, oh, great, transparency. But then you see some certain line items that are hugely expensive, almost all of the cost, and don't have any items under them. Let's talk about how this hospital visit cost that much.
Right? Let's get down to business.
One day, I woke up with some weird chest pain and shortness of breath. I knew I had a doctor's appointment the next day, so I kind of lived with this pain for a day.
Yes, because he's stubborn. You were stubborn.
Yep. And so then I go to the doctor's, I get a few tests done. They're like, all right, you don't have the breathing capacity you should. After the x-rays came back, they were like, well, the x-rays show that you have a collapsed lung and you're going to be spending the weekend in the hospital.
Exactly.
So that wasn't fun. And I had already not eaten anything that morning to do blood tests. And so I almost passed out when I heard that news. I'm like, oh, I was about to have a great weekend, and then this happens.
Exactly. So this condition is called pneumothorax in português. So
Spontaneous
it was
pneumothorax.
Yeah, pretty scary, muito assustador e sem causa nenhuma aparente.
I was still able to get in the car and whatnot, so she packed things up and picked me up at the doctor's office. We continued to the hospital, not too far away. We get to the emergency room.
Então a gente dirigiu até o hospital. Eu dirigi o Dave, ele ainda estava em condição. E a gente decidiu não chamar uma ambulância porque a gente sabia que o custo seria altíssimo. Então, por isso, resolvemos evitar um custo a mais que não é coberto, geralmente por nenhum plano de saúde.
I'm in this, emergency room hospital bed pretty quickly, but then the doctors take forever to decide to do anything. Like I got redundant x-rays taken because they just have to have their own x-rays and they have to be able to charge me for more x-rays just in case they didn't trust the doctor's x-rays that showed I had a collapsed lung.
Quando ele já tinha feito os raios-x no mesmo dia na clínica anterior, mas eles não aceitam esse raio-x repetido. Então eles te cobram a mais para tirar outros raios-x.
A bunch of doctors come in, a bunch of people who are just shadowing the doctors are in there. There's like 8 or 9 people in there. After, a couple hours, they get to the procedure after deliberating what they're gonna do. They had to numb me up a little bit, put in a catheter, which they told me my chest was like too muscular to get this catheter in. They're like, that's one thing you don't wanna hear your surgeons say is, these flimsy catheters. So they had to get like what was called a 24 French, I guess a sturdier catheter tube. And so they went in like right there. By that time I was numbed up a little bit around the area. That's what helped the most. And then they also gave me some intravenous kind of pain medication. So they're kind of digging around. It was the weirdest feeling. The whole thing took not too long, maybe 45 minutes or an hour. Felt like a really long time. I'm just chilling in ER. So this was considered a level 5 emergency room visit, which is the highest level. I beg to differ because I was waiting around for a while. I worked an entire day the day before having a collapsed lung. This was not as serious as they made it out to be.
Okay, I have to add some comments in Portuguese because Brazilians might not understand exactly what he's talking about. So basically, when I got there at the hospital, they called me.
You're speaking in English.
That's true. Então, quando eles me chamaram no hospital, eles pediram para eu revisar alguns documentos e assinar. E aí eu perguntei para ela se eu estaria assinando algum tipo de débitos, né? Que eu falei, olha, eu não tenho conhecimento ainda, eu prefiro não assinar nada. E ela falou, não, isso aqui é só para você confirmar o seu endereço e pra gente conferir o seu plano de saúde. Então, eu assinei esses documentos, tá? E outra coisa que eu achei muito diferente foi que eles não deixaram o Dave tomar nenhum tipo de líquido, porque ele iria fazer esse procedimento que ele explicou agora, que ele teve que colocar um catéter no pulmão para retirar as bolhas de ar que estavam lá colapsando o pulmão dele. E aí, ele não poderia tomar líquidos e eles também não ofereceram IV drops, né? A hidratação para ele, o soro. E aí, eu fui pedir ao médico, perguntar, será que não é bom ele se hidratar, já que ele não tá podendo tomar água, não pode comer? Aí ele, é claro, eu vou solicitar a enfermeira que coloque o soro na veia dele. E isso aí foi uma coisa que eu tive que pedir, que eu achei meio estranho. Mas fora isso, a gente não pode reclamar do atendimento do hospital. Eu achei que foi muito rápido, Foi muito incrível e todos os cirurgiões que estavam lá eram cirurgiões torácicos. Eles eram extremamente experientes. When he was moved from the ER to the apartment, to the room, because in Brazil it's called apartment, so apartamentos. Aqui eles chamam de room. Então a gente tinha mais privacidade. Eu tinha uma poltrona reclinável bem confortável para deitar. A gente tinha um banheiro, então a gente tinha toda uma privacidade. E esse é o quarto de hospital que eles chamam de nível 5. As if it was a super dangerous situation. Which wasn't. Então não era caso nem cirúrgico, ele nem precisou de cirurgia, mas ele foi colocado no quarto de nível mais alto, o que custou muito caro. So we have amazing things to say about the nurses. The nurses were amazing.
They were absolutely helpful and attentive, and almost too attentive at the beginning because we couldn't sleep. They were coming in to do the vitals check, but I was hooked up to the EKG machine all the time, and then they would do what seemed to be an unnecessary check every 4 hours, put the thing on my finger and then do the blood pressure test. And so it seemed a little bit much to wake us up in the middle of the night to do that when I was connected to, a vitals EKG machine at all times. Lots of things, lots of patches on my chest, and the tube that ran to a machine that was gradually sucking air out of my pleura space. So it was basically releasing pressure for the lung to re-expand. There was bubbles and blood that were coming out, and it was pretty gross. I had to carry that machine into the bathroom. They gave me a longer tube that connected to the wall so I could bring the machine into the bathroom like a suitcase connected to me.
And I would like to add something. O Dave não tinha muita dor. Nos primeiros momentos, ele até sentiu muita dor. E eles estavam sempre oferecendo Tylenol. So they were always offering Tylenol. E aí eu notei que elas estavam sempre empurrando, perguntando se eles não queriam tomar Oxy e fentanyl. Gente, quem que oferece esse tipo de medicação? Eu nunca vi isso no Brasil, a gente não tem o hábito, né? Até casos em que minha mãe, por exemplo, foi internada com dor renal, mesmo assim, eram outras medicações. Então, essas medicações aqui foram muito pesadas e elas ficavam constantemente oferecendo, mesmo ele tolerando a dor muito bem com o Tylenol. Então, eu não sei se isso tem a ver com eles quererem lucrar mais, porém, são medicações que causam um índice altíssimo de vício. Então, fora os riscos, né? As condições adversas, né? As reações que essas medicações têm. Então, eu não sei se tem a ver com plano de saúde, se é algo que é normal do hospital fazer, mas isso foi algo que me chamou muita atenção.
Okay, so here's the wild part. The total cost of this procedure would have been $23,723.96 for 3 nights in the hospital from basically a Friday to a Monday. Luckily, insurance covered, 80% of that. However, the remaining responsibility was $4,315.98. And, my insurance was pretty good. I had a $3,000 deductible and $8,000 total out of pocket for the year, but they are going to find a way around that. And so basically, they made the deductible $2,971.16, and then remaining co-insurance is $1,344.82. Basically, they kind of undercut that deductible and just classified part of it as co-insurance so they could go way past that $3,000 deductible, because all this was one medical incident. So what's the point of having a deductible if it doesn't even apply? Just like it does for cars, you only pay that much for one incident, one claim. So I don't know how they were able to charge me well over $1,000 past that deductible by reclassifying it. So that's always an interesting thing. And then they always have convoluted explanations that don't really make sense.
Vou só acrescentar aqui que o deductible, como eles chamam aqui, é o que a gente chama de franquia no Brasil. Então, mesmo que você pague todo mês, algo que a gente paga todo mês para o plano de saúde, você ainda assim vai pagar uma franquia no caso de um evento, né, de um acidente ou doença, você vai ter que pagar aquela franquia que eles chamam de deductible para que o plano entre e pague o restante. Então, mesmo assim, você vai pagar o deductible e ainda assim você vai pagar o co-insurance, que é como se fosse a nossa coparticipação. Então, tem isso aí.
So let's get into the breakdown of how these costs were calculated and really charged to us. Basically, the first section is the EKG.
Eletrocardiograma.
See, $186 charged twice. I'm not sure why it was twice versus like 3 times for the 3 days. I don't know how that was broken down, but I mean that's fine, reasonable. $186 charged twice, $372. Second charge was the emergency room at $2,804 for a level 5 visit. Again, I was waiting around for hours once I got to the ER. I worked an entire day beforehand. This shouldn't have qualified as a level 5 visit, but just to warn you, they will do whatever they can to classify it as level 5 visit and charge you a bit more.
Então, isso é a emergência, a sala que ele ficou nas primeiras 5 horas ali antes da gente conseguir um apartamento.
Later that day, I was transferred to one room and then waited there until like 7 p.m. and then moved to, that last room. IV therapy was next on the list at $444.
O soro, a hidratação na veia.
Quantity 2, it says. So the actual drugs that were listed, in that IV therapy are not expensive at all. They're listed in the pharmacy section. But it was the labor, I guess, 2 seconds of labor that went into administering those that cost the $444.
Que é o soro fisiológico, tá? Hidratação com remédios.
I was not under any anesthesia, so nothing like that was involved in this entire procedure. And the next section is when I was actually delivered to the room that I spent 3 nights in. Luckily, you were there with me the whole time.
Yes.
That was so sweet. And we got to hang out and watch the Fallout series and other stuff like that, which was great, and HGTV, other fun stuff. So this was by far the biggest bulk of the cost, $15,417 for all 3 nights, which was $5,139 per night in what they call, an HB room and board intermediate room. So it's also called intensive care unit. So I don't know what about this room was intensive care. When I called multiple times to figure out why this was so expensive and also not itemized, they basically said that this was in between a normal hospital room and intensive care.
Eles estão chamando de UTI, basicamente. O que, pra mim, não parecia ser uma UTI, até porque o caso dele não era um caso de operação, um caso super grave. Mas, enfim, a gente ainda não entendeu muito bem.
I mean, they might as well send me to a tropical paradise and have an amazing time there, while having this treatment. Because where is all that going? Everything else is itemized, and then over 65% of the cost was from just the room.
Eles não discriminam os itens que foram, cobrados ali na UTI, nessa UTI. Então, a gente não sabe realmente o que está sendo cobrado. Se é a diária mesmo, ou, enfim, se cobram até o oxigênio, a TV, a gente não sabe.
So what I thought was a very transparent document and list of charges was pretty opaque after all. And yeah, I mean, that's where almost all the costs go. Because like I see the laboratory, that added up at $1,383.
Blood tests, todos os exames de sangue.
Yeah, at least it's all there and it makes sense. They're explaining, what's going on there. My biggest issue is with that intensive care unit.
Continue with the list. Oxigênio por dia. Eles cobram até o oxigênio que você usa. Temos $560.
Yeah, so they took me off the oxygen on Sunday, I believe. I had been there for 2 days. That was nice, not having just something in my nose. Other therapeutic services. This was one that I really did not ever end up understanding. This is like in addition to the IV therapy section charge, which was $444. And this added up to be over 1,000, these additional injections. IVP. So the pharmacy section, a mere $256.96. Everything's listed there. Like the heparin, which is something that they would stick into my belly twice a day to make sure I didn't have blood clots being so inactive, just being in a bed.
Eu achei isso
That's
muito
great.
interessante. Eles têm um cuidado muito grande em relação às pessoas que ficam muito tempo deitadas sem se mexer. Então, o Dave recebia 2 doses diárias de heparina para evitar, né, essa má circulação e evitar uma provável embolia pulmonar, inclusive.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few times where if I just moved a little bit, the tube would irritate my insides so much that it was painful. Tylenol helped a lot, but there were 2 occasions that I got oxycodone, and the Tylenol did help. Getting the tube out on Monday was the biggest game changer.
É um custo bem baixo, realmente. Eles cobram $6,38 por Tylenol. Só para vocês saberem. Heparina, $10,29. Claro que tiveram várias doses. There is also the lidocaine, essa que a gente chama de lidocaína, que é para adormecer a área, né? Para anestesiar ali localmente, que custou $34,96.
Yeah, so they would inject that into the spot where they put the tube and around kind of where it touched my insides, which felt weird. Those few categories, the IV therapy, the insane charge for the intensive care unit each night, and the other therapeutic services were kind of the most suspect to me.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like those were wildly overcharged, and they could not accurately explain those.
To summarize, we have to pay $4,315.98. A gente teve acesso a essas contas. How much time after did we receive the bill or the amount?
Yeah, so it was about 2 weeks after, but then didn't have to start paying until about 6 weeks after.
Mm-hmm.
After some research, we had found that a lot of people had had success calling into the hospital and getting a settlement amount if you offered to pay all at once. We weren't able to get anything reduced. They did say they took the investigation seriously, and they went through item by item to evaluate if that was the correct cost, and they, of course, said it was. So basically, they somehow find a way to justify all those costs. I just don't wish this on anybody to have a spontaneous collapsed lung.
Se tem uma coisa que eu posso falar aqui, depois dessa nossa experiência, é que nem mesmo os americanos entendem o sistema de saúde aqui, tá? Então não se preocupe se você não entende, a gente ainda tá aprendendo. Eu pesquisei muito também, mas ainda continuo com muitas dúvidas. Então, se vocês tiverem comentários aqui a adicionar, perguntas, podem deixar. E uma coisa que eu posso garantir é: prefira ter qualquer plano de saúde do que nenhum plano de saúde. Porque aqui é tudo que realmente falam. O custo de cirurgias, de acidentes, visitas a hospitais é muito alto e você não quer isso. Então é melhor você pagar 4, 5 mil o seu deductible do que você pagar uma conta aí astronômica de 80, 100 mil, 120 mil dólares. Nunca se sabe.
That being said, I'm really happy that they did their due diligence as far as treatment goes. They were very experienced and professional. I was just caught off guard by several of these items on here. So let us know what you think. Have you had a similar procedure that ended up costing a lot more than you expected? Do you think this is fair? Do you think that maybe the executives of hospitals are taking too much? And maybe even the doctors and the nurses aren't making their fair share. I mean, there's just a lot of things that ran through our minds when we see these costs that aren't itemized.
Deixa aqui a sua opinião pra gente.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thanks so much for watching and hearing our story. We'll catch you in the next video.
Tchau.
Ciao.